Welcome to Depth of Field. I'm your host, Penny De Los Santos. I'm here virtually with Tirso Gamboa. He's a creative director in New York City. He's worked across some of the top magazine publishers, including Condé Nast, Hearst, Time Inc., Meredith. And he's designed 25 plus different magazines, to name a few: Teen Vogue, Wired, Travel and Leisure, WWD. What's WWD?
Women's Wear Daily.
Ah, okay. Cool. He's a creative director. He's formerly the vice president of creative at Fairchild Media Group, based in New York City. Tirso is an incredible source of inspiration for me. We connect all the time, and I couldn't wait to have him here where we could connect in a more public space and kind of just talk about inspiration and finding it and looking for it. Anyway, Tirso, welcome to Depth of Field.
Thank you for having me.
It's a Saturday morning. It's a beautiful day out. Did you sign up for your tennis courts already?
I did. I finished playing early this morning, 6:38. So
wow, that's impressive. Full disclosure, Tirso is a client of he's a client of mine. We've worked together. And I've always enjoyed the space you create on the set. You know, it feels very inclusive, feels very positive, non-threatening. It's not, it's just a really nice space. And I love that. I love working with you because it's one of the many reasons I love working with you. So I just wanted to let everybody know that I feel like Tirso brings so many things to the table. That's one of them. But he and I connect a lot, and we talk about inspiration, or I should say, I often talk to you about like how things are going,
yeah.
But I wanted to just ask you, like, where do you go for inspiration? Like, what are the things you do? It can be practices or.
Honestly, Penny, you'll relate to this. It's like I eat out a lot. And so, there's a lot of stories through food. And I think that is like, I always connect to culture through food, travel, and then even music. But in terms of inspiration into my work, it's always through food. Like when I eat at a restaurant, like I look at the design of the menus, and I think there's like this, there's a reasoning behind that. Mm-hmm. And I find inspiration through design like that. But even the spaces of restaurants are, really incredible. I think travel in general, if anything that gets you to travel, is really the best thing for designers.
I think that's so true. What do you think it is about travel that inspires you?
I think, it gets me out of, possibly it's just coming to me now, actually, is that, we've lived in New York for so long that everything we see, you kind of take for granted. Mm-hmm. A little bit. And I think in the design world, everything is purposeful. So we're just not, here and observing, we're participating in the design. And when you travel, you're participating in the city and that experience versus where if you're at your home city, you're kind of just walking around, and it's like, I know what that looks like. I've been there, multiple times, but I think there's in a purposeful observation of experiencing the city.
Yeah. I also think there's something about it too that just, I don't know, for me, I do I become introspective, I imagine how people's lives are there. And there's something about that helps me just get out of my own way.
Right.
And just open up, because it's like you said, it's this new experience.
It is a new experience.
Yeah. I love that. Do you feel like you've traveled much since COVID?
No. I don't know. I did 3 Europe trips last year. So it was, nice. I feel like that's, a lot, like, considering, but, not that much, I'm not as much as I used to.
Yeah.
So, but like enough, at least once a year, once or
Yeah.
twice a year.
I think that's maybe what's happening for me. I haven't traveled since COVID. I mean, I've traveled in the country, but
Okay.
even that, it's been like the same kind of like to go see family, come back, but I haven't done anything out of the country. And I think that's where I feel the most inspired too, is when I travel and just experiencing a different culture beyond what I know. So meaningful.
I think like changing the environment really just
Yeah.
it does change you also and how you do things. And I think it's just if you get in a rut or if you're looking for something new, like any experience in that capacity does affect you and it affects your work ultimately.
And so when you come back from a successful trip, so how does that, what do you take from that travel experience back into your workspace? Like,
So, I mean, I would like 2017, and I don't think we worked together just yet then. It was right before you got your Leica and I got my Leica.
oh yeah,
So we connected there.
yeah.
But I actually, at some point, I stopped taking photos with my iPhone and I started only taking photos purposely with an actual camera. And, when I come back, I go through all of the photos, like the entire film, every single video, and I edit down. And a lot of that I archive away into a photo library of research, like here were the colors of, a certain area or just things like that. I know on TikTok right now there's this viral trend of like, what's your beauty haul from City Pharma? But I actually go around and I do a typography haul, and I take
Oh, I
photos
love that.
of posters around the city. I take photos of the addresses and the signs to just see, how things are.
Wow, I love that. And so, yeah, that would make sense. And then you could refer to it, and it kind of does influence your design
Right.
and how you work. Wow. God, I find that if I'm shooting in the field, I'm like working constantly. So when it just feels like, it can feel like work for me. So
Yeah.
it's a little, it's different, but maybe I just need to
Interesting.
reframe that for myself. Anytime I pick up a camera, it can feel like I'm, I
It
feel
feels like
like,
work
oh,
to you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
Interesting.
work. So
Yeah.
sometimes even the iPhone feels like, oh, I need to, I immediately go into details, composition, I start to just go through kind of this like, idea of what makes a great photo. And I don't know that I feel like I have to make this meaningful picture rather than maybe just document what I'm seeing, which feels like really
Right.
refreshing.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, I wish I had those abilities to do that.
Well, I mean, I think you do, but you're documenting for reference and inspiration, and I love that idea. Um, Something for me to think about. All right. So, what are some, like, when you're in a creative rut or when you're just feeling uninspired? Like, do you have a practice that you do to kind of help you move through it?
I mean, I think there are practices. I look through, that I do look through that archive of travel, or going to a museum regularly is
Mm-hmm.
really helpful in getting out of a creative rut. Is to just surround yourself with other creative things. Um, I can't even imagine designers that say I'm in a rut and then they just kind of sit there
Mm-hmm.
and wait, or they look online. And online, I think online it kind of has to be more like calculated, if that makes sense, because in
Mm-hmm.
order to find inspiration you have to think about what to search for and go down that road versus if you go to a museum, like things are happening kind of happenstance, and that's kind of, you want ideas to come to you naturally.
Right. And
In
someone's
that,
actually thoughtfully curated
right.
this thing for you.
But also, contrary to the last question, if I'm in a rut, like I will book a trip so fast to just,
Wow.
get there. And I almost always have at least 1 or 2 museum days for my travels. So, something to just spend. I mean, I could spend like the day, like if I don't eat lunch and just spend the day at the museum, it's the best
Wow.
day.
Wow. I don't do that enough. And here we live in New York. I just don't do it enough. I need to do it more. Um, I love that. Yeah. So you just get online and you're like, where's the cheapest ticket?
Or yeah, like yeah, like but anywhere, like I think it's even
And you always out of the country. Is that the preference?
it's typically the preference because if
Yeah.
it's I know myself that like when I need a break, like I need like a clean break, and so if before I could hide and be like I don't have service, don't call me here,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
which is nice to like fully unplug. But it could even be as like taking the train down to Philly
Hmm.
or DC and just spending a day outside of New York out of there. I mean, I'm not how I am, but like even like going to Brooklyn is like a change of pace.
Yeah. You got to bring your
So
passport. Yeah.
like, it's just I would say like get out of your environment, but I would over time I've learned to like consistently be doing things out of habit that a creative rut happens less. um I think it's also dependent on what's going on in your life, but
Hmm.
there are ways to kind of not prevent it but just make it less bad.
Hmm. So you kind of have a routine, and you're aware. You're really self-aware when you start to maybe go down that path of darkness.
I mean, I also have outside of a library of like, research and things that I've taken, I also have like a back pocket library of ideas that never saw the light of day. And so I go through that as like, do we resurrect one of these things
Mm.
into, a new project because it never got anywhere. And there are so many good ideas thrown out the door.
Yeah. Wow, I love that, Tirso. So you
Like
keep a
there's
notebook with your ideas, and you just kind of reference it when you need to.
yeah. I mean, in the notebook of all the ideas that I wish came to fruition but never
Hmm.
did. So, I mean, no idea will ever fit a new template, but you can riff off of that
Hmm.
and turn it into something new.
Wow, that's so. Wow, you've given me so many great things. So you're looking around. You look for inspiration.
I
You
do look for
travel,
inspiration.
and you also keep a book of ideas, which I know sounds like duh. Why not? I have a book of notes.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm having like a meeting or something, I have this book. But I don't keep a log of the ideas I didn't pursue, which actually seems like such a great idea.
It's like it's very, it is kind of, and this is something that I think of, and I probably would do like a video series on this, is like all the ideas that I wish for projects, because I think that there's sometimes when you're pitching something and you're so excited about it, but nobody else is,
Mm,
and it's kind of like, is it a bad idea or is it just the wrong project? And
right.
so you know, um, I mean, to bring like when I worked with you at Karen Katie, the amount of times
Hmm.
I tried to use a script typeface in my designs and they never
They
went
didn't.
for
They
it.
weren't. They weren't into it.
9 years, never once let
Wow.
me run a script typeface. But
Interesting. But you still tried. Yeah.
still tried, started running script typefaces, everything was fine. So like so it wasn't a bad idea, but like, there are these things. And, I don't also know like if you work this way as a creative, but like I never expected myself to have these like periods in my design career.
Hmm.
And so there's these periods where it's just like I'm super into like blocky typography or, old fashioned serifs again. And you can see like I know every moment of my work when I did it because I have periods where I was like, this is all I'm doing for the next 8 months.
Wow.
So it's because it's like that's where you learn how to really work with
Hmm.
things, right? Like, I don't want to do things once. And it's just like, I feel like if I've mastered certain areas of design, then those kind of become the crutch
Hmm.
when I get into those ruts,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely does. I think it's similar in photography. You can kind of have your baseline approach, the way you kind of tackle everything, but it's a crutch too. To approach something with fresh eyes is kind of like what you want to do every time, but it's not always. Don't always like have that in mind when you're approaching something. Um, so you've worked with a ton of photographers, a lot of different stylists. Um, is there, in your opinion, like a common denominator between all of them that you feel like it makes them successful? I'm not sure if I'm making that question, if I'm asking that question right. Does that make sense how I frame that?
It does.
Is there a common denominator between the most successful kind of creative people you've worked with?
I think it depends, because there's two types of, I think it depends on how we want to define success, right? Because there are, photographers, for example, like Inez Nude, or like a Peggy Sirota or an Annie Leibovitz, and you hire them for their work, and you kind of want nothing to do. Not that you want to release the project, but like you hire them to do whatever it is they do, right? And you kind of just like take over, and they also, like, some of them don't want you to be part of that process. And so, like, there is that world where you become so niche in your craft that people hire you to just be you. When it comes to, the photographers that I like to work with that are more collaborative, I would say it's like, the biggest thing is to like leave the ego at the door, kind of, is like being open. I mean, so many times I'm on set with you, and the photograph that we end up with was not what I had in mind when I walked through the door. And I found that, like, that's when we had the most successful results, was that we were kind of creating things in the moment. So, yeah.
So, like, being collaborative.
Being collaborative.
Leaving the ego at the door.
It is. I mean...
Positive work environment.
Positive work environment.
A lot of egos in this city.
There is. I mean, it's New York.
Yeah.
It's New York.
Yeah. I always say it's more like the people I gravitate to are the ones that are, it's just a non-threatening environment. It's okay to be you. It's okay to not know the answer and to make mistakes, but authentically just be yourself.
Right.
I was at a dinner party last night, and I mean, it's New York, people put on airs, but I always try to I just try to sit with someone who's just gonna like want to have a great conversation and is low stakes in the sense that I'm not going to have to we're not going to have to volley for who's
right. Like who's doing what, which, I've been in those situations. I'm sure you have as well. And it's not that, I don't look, that photographer moving forward. But it is a different interaction. And I think, I do have to base things when I'm booking a photographer, like who's the client also. If I have a really tough client, for me personally, like I can't book a photographer that I know I'm going to have a little bit of a ruffle with on set. Like it's just not, like, I can't manage two people. So, the team, it does unfortunately affect who I have on set with me. But a majority of the clients are not difficult. So, it's like, fine, I mean, everyone does great work, and, that's why they're there, but it does add a factor when there is a little bit of a hurdle. I do think the hurdles come down quite a bit over time. There's some photographers that, the first or second shoots I've been on with them were a little bit of a, rocky relationship, but then after, it became so seamless. So,
Wow. So even though you had kind of a, maybe not, this is like in the course of one kind of photo shoot, it could start out rocky, it evolves, and then it becomes maybe positive.
It's, well, because we do go back to the agents. Like a lot of agents will come to us after, especially if it's first time working with a photographer, how are they on set? And, sometimes it would be like, it was a flat no, I don't want to work with them again. But like, I think for me, like, that's just an extreme case. A lot of other photographers that I work with, and I'm sure, you've worked with stylists, etc., come through recommendations, and I do trust the network that I have. And so, if they're getting work, like, there has to be something there. And I'm always curious on, maybe it was just a miscommunication during some part of the process, or maybe they weren't into the project and I have to find something else for them. So I would say that the interaction has to be so bad for me to just not want to work with them again.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes sense. You want to work with people who are I would imagine obviously talented, creative, but also easy to work with for the
Super
most part.
easy.
Yeah.
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 I mean, what's helpful is that, I also have, it's not just a photographer, like you have the stylist. And so it's like,
Yeah.
if you have a few people on set that's like kind of gelling,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, you're not just arguing the whole day. And, there's not really that much argument. You're that or create a photo, like we're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Like, let's just end the day with beautiful photography.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. In your opinion, what's what is your advice for staying fresh and staying on top of the game creatively?
I mean, I think one, constantly work, like, and I think I mentioned this in another conversation with you, is like getting paid or not, like, we're not really here. We're here to get paid what we're worth, but at the same time, like, we're really here for the creative projects. And so I think it's like, constantly work, and, it's kind of easier said than done, but work does come along the way with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if you're just designing, like, design things for free, or just for yourself, not for free, right?
Yeah.
Like, for yourself. And then, be aware of what everyone else is doing. I think there needs to be some gauge on where you stand. And I think that's how you know where you need to push yourself to be. I would say that I started as a print designer, and then when I saw that the industry started shifting towards digital, then I was like, okay, well, I can't just stay in this print space. I have to learn this new skill, etc. I mean, I had some web design back then when I was in school, but I took interaction design, I took UX design, and then I shifted into that space when I was at the Foundry. So, like, you kind of have to grow with the industry as it grows on its own.
So that brings up another question. So where do you feel like advertising is going? Do you sense a shift? What's your take on it?
I actually sense a divide, which is I sense a divide in the old creative directors. Myself, I'm bucketing myself there because of how I function, is because I learned from the older creative directors and like how business is supposed to be, and we pride ourselves on a certain type of work that we do. And I think a lot of them aren't interested in this kind of like new, like it is more fun, it is more accessible, it's more approachable, but it's foreign. And then I think this new generation, what we do is foreign to them. So it's just kind of like these two worlds that you're either in one bucket or the other. Like, I haven't really found any gray area in between.
Do you sense that, like, what is your take on, like, is it mostly going social now? Is there still some, I mean, I know there's some print, but how much, like, are you seeing like a massive shift? And it's like, wow, after the pandemic, it's just really become like such a strong push for more social campaigns.
It's push for more social. What I'm actually seeing in terms of like print design specifically is events. Because it's very difficult to, people in the event space, like, it's such a huge thing these days, is to, if you're not a company having events, like, it's a huge miss on connecting with people.
Interesting.
A lot of, I mean, in my last job, we did maybe 25 events a year. And so, like, that's kind of how you create a community around your brand, is having these events. And so with each event, then you need printed signage, which can include, type photography, texture, whatever the branding is going to be. I mean, if you're asking in terms of like, printed photography, I do see like social's almost a requirement, but I don't know that that it's like the only thing, right? Like, we're trying to get eyes on things for sure. Video is really big right now, especially, with the search in TikTok, everyone's kind of on video, and specifically vertical video. So, turn that 16:9 around, which makes it more challenging than, I actually find that more challenging than when we had to shift to like a square format for photographs,
Uh-huh.
because it's like so limiting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I find that I'm having to like the client wants a video, but wants the option to make it because it's going to run vertical. So then I've got to shoot video back enough so that they can crop it vertical and get enough of the
yep.
idea in the frame. It's like,
Yeah,
what is going on? But I feel like there's a big shift. It's more social for sure. There's
it's more
always a social
social.
component.
I mean, I would say, and I've always loved this, especially about your work also, is older photographers. And when I say older, not I mean by discipline, not by age, shifting into video because the lighting is just better. Like the storytelling is better
Mm-hmm.
that I found. And I mean, I think that's also like my goal mostly now is bringing photographers into the video space.
Oh, cool. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Because, for you, I mean, I can actually talk about this specifically with you, is that, when I was first introduced to you, it was like, Penny's a food photographer. And then when I was working on that not Starbucks, Staples campaign, we were doing the desk characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I just want morning light. And I thought of you because I was like, she shoots food all the time. She shot Starbucks for me. I was like, all I need is that morning window light onto
Mm-hmm.
these desk spaces. And she can do that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was, when I'm booking projects, I'm also partially thinking about what work I want for the photographer to have just so that they can get that project into their portfolio.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like, I mean, I was like,
That's nice of you.
I actually think it's like, I do this as a manager also. It's like if I see that one of my designers has too much type work in their portfolio, then I'll give them a photo shoot to work on. Or if I don't see enough video or like any areas that I think they're missing,
Mm-hmm.
and I give them that opportunity to be able to expand their portfolio.
Oh, that's cool. I love that.
So, like I mean, I see the space. I do think yes, social is a requirement, but because of social is a requirement, I think video is a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's nice to, get video work for photographers. If I'm able to get it for them.
Right. All right. Here's kind of just a quick fire question. When you hear about a photographer, what's the first thing you do? Like someone says, "Oh, there's this photographer or whatever," and you find their name. What's the first thing you do?
I asked for the portfolio.
Okay, so you're looking at their website, or
I'm looking at oftentimes their website.
Yeah.
If there's a PDF, that's fine.
so you're not like, let me see what they're doing on Instagram, or do you kind of go to all like website, Instagram, just kind of
I
see where they
always go to the website first.
Okay.
Just because I feel like the website's a curated experience
For sure, yeah.
versus Instagram, not that it's not curated, certainly you're posting your favorite moments, but I feel like Instagram is to see the work you're doing versus like the website that's presenting your portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And let's say you go, you're considering this photographer, you've gone to their website, and do you look at their social media as well? Does that play in it at all too?
I actually don't. I don't. I'm not saying that creative.
I love that. I love that.
But because I think after looking at the portfolio, I'm pretty sure that I like have an idea already of like, what caliber are they able to work with. And, I guess, something that I'll tangent to in this answer is also like what I'm looking for in their portfolio. And I think it's like I look at the photographs and see what I would have done differently. Or I'll note in particular if I see a photograph and it's like, how did they get that, photo? There was, I forgot his name.
That's okay.
But he had a photograph of this model posing on one of the poles on the train stations.
Mm-hmm.
And every single pole was lit up in the photograph, like to a T. And I was like, is this done in retouching? But like nobody on the train is paying attention. Like everyone's just, it's like kind of each person's like a different character. And it's like, was this cast? Like it was just a beautiful photograph. Really well lit, but like I mean, and I look at and I stop to look at something like this and think like I couldn't do this? Like I would be, can you do this? Can you, like it would be so curated, but it was just, I mean, did he get lucky? Like, but if a photograph stops me, I almost always meet with a photographer.
It's beautiful. I love that. I don't hear that enough, I feel. I don't. I feel like it's, it's a machine and you're feeding it constantly.
Yeah.
Every day is a new day. And you're just like, whoa.
It's true. I mean, social makes it really difficult, to keep up because, I think during the pandemic, I started those carousels on my social and I was like, oh my God, this is so much work.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so much work to put those together. And, for people to do that daily is beyond.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot. I try to post 5 days a week.
Wow.
I think it's part of just a healthy practice. I mean, I think if you're, I don't, I'm not sure how much it contributes, but I do think at the end of the day, if you're a photographer in 2023, you're a brand.
Yeah.
We're all a brand basically, if to a certain degree,
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I don't want to take too much of your time. I have one final question and then I want to just ask you if you want to add anything, but, do you have any advice just for, a lot of the people that are going to be listening to the podcast, I imagine are, mid-career, maybe even starting. But similar to me, I think, they have ups and downs in their work. And I just wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for any creative person out there? Just in general, like, what advice do you have? If you could sit with them and just like impart just advice on what to be doing.
I think the advice is different depending on what level you're at, but overall, like focus on the work first, right? Because, I see that, and I've heard this from designers as well, is, there's not that many opportunities, but like if you do stick with it long enough, that opportunity actually does come. And if you're not ready for it because you haven't done the work, to be ready for it, like, that was kind of your ticket,
So focus on the work.
Yeah. So it's really like a focus on the work, and it's not about, clout, like, don't overlook projects for clients because, I will say like as the projects that I've worked on, I don't control which projects come through the door either. Like it's not like I can just choose a brand and say, let's partner with them. I mean, obviously there's brands that I work with regularly, but, the execution is different.
Yeah.
If you're a small photographer, like maybe you're a photographer looking for work and you do portraits of like, small business owners or something, in 2015, 2016, we had that push of like the doers and the movers and the, like that was the time to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Because there was so much work that came down that way. And so it's like you really needed to be able to focus on your work prior to that moment. And then if you kind of missed it, it's kind of tough to do it that way.
Yeah.
I guess it's like, I would say the portfolio, because I focus on that a lot, is if it's a bad photograph, do not put it in there.
Yeah.
Like a photograph can actually ruin a portfolio because it adds like this like tiny seed of doubt on, what happened with the other work and like, why is this, in there. So I would say, tighten up the portfolio that, and only put work that you're really like proud of and that you want to present, which is also like why I don't go to the Instagram account, is because, if you wanted it in your portfolio, you would have put it up on your website at the end of the day. So, some people have great Instagram accounts and have awful portfolios.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like there's so much money on the line when it comes to a client that, that money can't be allocated based off the Instagram profile.
Well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Do you see a fine line between a content creator and a photographer? Or what do what do you have to?
I do, there is, but it's, I, I'm trying to find the words like to phrase this properly because I mean I'm doing my own content creation also, and I think that you know the focus is different. So like one isn't necessarily worse than the other, but like the content creator focuses on the content specifically.
Mm-hmm.
The photographer focuses on capturing the
Mm-hmm.
content.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that it would be beneficial if the content creator focused on creating content, but also knew how to capture it in a more eloquent way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they go more hand in hand than
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Yeah, I do too. I feel like I'm seeing more photographers calling themselves content creators. To me, that just means you understand the social media language and space, and it means that you understand how to monetize, or trend wise how to monetize something, a product, a
Yeah,
place.
it's true.
It's interesting though.
Because like it's kind of similar in the design space.
Mm-hmm.
I would say part of it also, like content creators, like your client is just kind of your audience versus like photography, like we have a client
Mm-hmm.
to work with,
Yeah.
which affects the work, and it's a different factor when it comes to it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm comparing this to designers online, designers online can design whatever they want, and it can be beautiful. It's not that I couldn't, produce, in some capacities, there are things that I couldn't produce as beautifully as they do. Um, but because there's a client that I'm working with, there are, stipulations that come with it. There's limitations on
Yeah.
what I can do. And so I think like in that aspect, being a photographer with a client, like, that's like the more curated and practical route of the work, versus like a content creator. It's kind of like fair game,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the tiny things in craft also, right? Like if you miss you have a bad reflection on your online content, your
Mm-hmm.
audience isn't going to really rip you apart and say, oh, you missed this part. But when you have a client, they're going to be pissed,
Yeah.
right? Like, this wasn't perfect. This is messy. So like there is a level of craft that needs to happen between the
Mm-hmm.
two. And, I'm not knocking it, but that is the difference between, what a content creator does versus what a photographer or designer does.
Hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. I want to ask you that question in like 2 years again, because I think
Yeah, yeah.
it's going to change. It's changing so
It,
fast. It's
it
interesting.
is. I mean, I do think that because, and I know you've been creating a lot of content on your Instagram also. I do think that our approach is different because of where we've come from.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can never turn, I mean, you kind of said it earlier in this interview that you can't turn your mind off, right? So if you're creating content, the photography aspect of it is just going to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for me, I think that, if I'm creating content, it could never be ugly. Like
Yeah.
there's,
Yeah.
it's actually harder to do that because we've had to work at a certain level,
Mm-hmm.
for some time. So it would take me longer to purposely make things look bad than it
It's
is to just,
hard. Yeah. Yeah. I had a client this summer who wanted me to make a user generated content. So they wanted it to feel like someone who doesn't use the phone every day as, a medium to capture. So they
it's
didn't,
hard.
yeah, it was really hard. I didn't put it on a stabilizer, but even still it felt polished, because my instinct was to make it
Right.
pretty.
Right.
That was very challenging. And I think it brings up like, you know, I don't know, I just feel it is a different language. And it is a different set of tools when you start, uh,
Right.
I guess, is it creating content? I mean, I feel like, yeah, there is a different language. There are different trends in that language.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. Do you have anything you want to add? Any closing thoughts or ideas?
I would say I mean, I know the times are tough right now, and it's kind of like this journey that I'm going on all over again since I went freelance recently. Is just the fact that just stick with the craft, because it's what brought us into this industry, and it's what's going to keep us going. One of who was that photographer? Andrew Salem. I did remember him. I was on set with him, and he's like, I don't look at the bill anymore. He's like, I don't care what you're paying me, and I never know what you're paying me, because he's like, if I'm shooting, income will be coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that really set with me. That's just it's true. And, now freelancing for the moment, financially, it's fine, right? It's not as much as I used to make, certainly, but I'm loving the journey.
Yeah.
I feel so much more fulfilled now. And this is why we went into, why I went to design, is because of this.
Mm.
And so, I know the economy is not great, and it's easy to, lose that focus. And, some people may even say that that's a privilege to be able to have that decision. But, I kind of rubbed that off a little bit, because I was broke when I first moved to New York, and that was the tactic that I used, was just focusing on the work. And then, the money eventually came later on. And so now that I did that again, we took a huge dip in salary in June, and now I'm kind of crawling back, simply because I'm focusing on just working. And I'm doing favors for people. I'm designing content online. I'm just designing every single day, just keeping up with it. And not keeping up with it. It's just kind of weird to not design. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I totally.
It's just weird to say, "Oh, I didn't design anything today." What do you mean? So,
I love that. Just focus on the work. That's excellent advice.
It's
easy enough, but you can forget that. I forget that.
Yeah.
Focus on the work. Yeah.
It's I've just had so many moments where, especially with the pandemic, I think people care now more about fulfillment than anything else. And, you're never going to get that fulfillment unless you enjoy the work first.
Yeah. It's true. I think, I mean, everybody, I certainly feel it. You and I talk about this a lot. It does feel like it's a little downtrodden right now.
Yeah.
And focusing on the work and just going through the motions and not giving up,
Right.
It's you cook more at home, you tighten your belt strap a little bit, and you just focus on the work. And I do think, actually, if I'm honest, that is the sweet spot, because I do feel like breakthroughs happen in that space when you do feel like you have less, and you don't feel like you have much hope, but you're just still believing.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I don't know if I want to go back to an office and do work, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take away that opportunity if at a later, to your point, if you were going to have this conversation with me in 2 years, I'll be a different person. But, in 4 months' time, I'm going to have a different mindset. And, if a job were to come around and I'm interested, I don't want to knock that off, or I don't want to cut off that opportunity because I haven't been doing work since then.
Right.
So,
absolutely,
and, it's just, I did a retouching project the other day. It's not design, but it's
right.
It does keep your mind, in that space, at least.
I think that's great. I mean, that is incredible advice. And I think it's a perfect place for us to kind of wrap up and, stop there, think about it, focus on the work, everybody. Keep your head down. Don't give up. Look at things. Take a trip, get a new, fresh perspective. Yeah. Incredible. Tirso, always like such a beautiful, inspirational time when I talked to you. And
Oh, thank you,
I wanted
Penny.
everybody to feel that when we connected here. So thank you for your time and for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me anytime.
Well, Tirso Gamboa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Penny.
To everybody watching and listening, thank you all. This is Depth of Field Podcast. Thanks for all the support, and I wish you all a beautiful day.